One is an overwhelmingly domineering and obsessive character. The other is a compliant and clingy white-haired figure. Originally, they were the dual male protagonists of a boys' love story, but they both ended up falling for the same girl. Alice was originally an avid fan of this comic. After following the updates for 2.5 years, just as the story was about to reach its most thrilling part, she suddenly found herself transmigrated into the comic as the malicious supporting female character. Even though she missed out on the exciting part, starting over and watching it unfold live wasn't too bad either. Every day, there was the charming attending physician, Elvin, always by her side, but it seemed he had forgotten one thing, that when he would meet the two protagonists in the future, the first one to feel awkward would be him. Thinking of this, Alice felt utterly hopeless. Not only could she not witness the exciting part, she had also become a part of their play. In the gloomy tower, a boy completely restrained lay there. It was because of a single glance exchanged with a woman that he was struck with dozens of lashes. Whenever the woman was in a bad mood, she would come here to vent her frustrations, but no matter what methods the woman tried, the boy's bloodshot eyes showed no trace of emotional fluctuation, and he is none other than the princess of this story, Edwin. In his past life, he became Alice's punching bag and sought out this white-haired person to heal him. As it turned out, when the two met again, Edwin awakened his powers. The first thing he did after emerging was execute the original host. This left Alice feeling a bit troubled. How could she avoid a fatal ending and still manage to ensure their meeting went smoothly? It was at this moment Evan stood up and walked away. His tone and actions carried no trace of personal emotion, which was hardly surprising. After all, before crossing over, Alice was already a notorious little troublemaker. Even though Ivan didn't like her, he would still fulfill his duties as a doctor. It was just that Alice remembered seeking help. 1 year later, Ivan was appointed as a military doctor, and eventually lost his life on the battlefield. It was after that the white cat disappeared. Arrived at the Duke's residence, never expected such a stunningly handsome man would meet an untimely death. At that moment, Alice's mother, Karina, came here, but from his tone, there was no sense of care or affection for Alice. After seeing Alice was still alive, she turned and left. Evan turned his head and noticed the sorrowful look in Alice's eyes. He gave a light cough and said, "Miss, let's have a meal first." But how could Alice possibly have an appetite to eat right now? Alice's sudden gentle tone made Ivan feel somewhat uncomfortable. After Ivan stepped out, he reminded the maid that he had no appetite. Yet the less one wants to eat, the more they should pay attention to their diet. This statement puzzled the maid a bit. After all, before he arrived, the young lady had already finished 3 bowls of rice. Alice was humming a tune while sketching out her plans in the room. After a long time, she finally made up her mind. Next, Alice sat upright in her chair. She summoned her servant to come in. Recalling how Alice looked earlier, the servant trembled all over in fear. However, Alice spoke in a gentle tone, asking if he could do her a favor. The Duchess Ferkelina dressed elegantly, getting ready to attend a banquet alone for the first time. Of course, Alice, who knew the plot inside out, understood. This time, he not only avoided becoming a social butterfly, but was also ridiculed by the noblewomen for having been the Duchess's maid in the past, and faced sarcastic remarks from the wealthy ladies. But none of this mattered to him. Is Alice planning to take this opportunity to meet the male lead? 2 days ago, he had asked a servant to craft an exceptionally sturdy lock, and had already obtained the location of the round tower where Edwin was being held. Alice firmly believed that as long as she continued to touch his heart, that should be enough to spare my own life. Alice is now 7 years old. Edwin is 8 this year. Miss Hale is 6 years old. This is the perfect time to shape their personalities. It was when he realized he had been walking toward the round tower for quite a while, yet he hadn't even made it halfway there. To be fair, this estate is truly vast. By evening, he finally managed to reach the round tower. The moment he pushed the door open, he realized there were countless stairs waiting for him, to the extent that after climbing just a few steps, he collapsed onto the hospital bed from exhaustion. From that moment on, Alice would visit the round tower every day, and gradually gained experience over time, becoming increasingly adept at climbing the stairs. What surprised Alice was, even Ivan's attitude began to improve slowly. Perhaps it's about feeling sympathy for one's own background. Alice seized the opportunity to make a point. She poured out her heart to him about how no one liked her. It would be wonderful to have a friend around the same age. That would make things so much better. The reason Alice acted this way was actually quite simple. She just wanted Ivan to introduce the white-haired Misha to her. Misha was someone she hoped Ivan would present to her. The next day, fully equipped, Alice set off on her way to the round tower. This time, she came fully prepared, with the experience from her previous attempts. At last, Alice arrived at the top level of the round tower at dusk. Guided by the servant's information, she fumbled along the wall, and finally found the key to open the door. With a nervous heart, she opened it. A foul stench immediately rushed toward her. Under the dim light of the oil lamp, Alice finally saw clearly what was described in the original story: the appearance of Edwin, and the various blood-stained torture instruments behind him. Alice hurriedly stepped forward to check his injuries, only to find that he showed no sign of movement. While he was still puzzled, a pair of hands suddenly reached out toward him. He was completely pinned down by Edwin, those blood-red and blue eyes devoid of any emotion, in stark contrast to Alice's panicked and terrified gaze. When her hand reached toward Alice's neck, her instinct for survival made her push Edwin away. The frail Edwin unexpectedly fainted as a result. This was all due to the years of torment he endured from Karina. In the original story, the former Duchess gave birth to a child, but her jet-black hair was completely different from her parents', which led to Edwin being slandered as an illegitimate child. Later, the Duchess passed away during childbirth. The maid Karina became the new Duchess, yet her humble origins left her deeply insecure. The only way to feel satisfied is by tormenting Edwin. This is what caused Edwin's body to become extremely weak. After the previous experience, Alice has learned to be more cautious. She placed the food she had prepared onto the plate. Then she took out a small twig. She quietly pushed the food over with it. She never expected the twig to be so long. To heal Edwin's wounds, he took out medicine and bandages, but when faced with the silent Edwin, he didn't dare to approach him easily, and could only cautiously test the waters around him. Yet Edwin's furious glare made Alice abandon the idea of treating his wounds. After that, Alice started bringing food to him every day, but Edwin didn't take a single bite, so much so that the food would eventually rot, and he had to clean it up himself. Even by the 6th day, nothing had changed. Watching Edwin refuse to eat anything, Alice could only hope that Miskell would arrive soon. He simply had no idea. His current expression was entirely caught by Edwin. Karina finally returned to the mansion. The outcome was exactly as Alice had predicted. In his powerless rage, he could only vent his anger on a maid nearby. To help Karina calm down, the maid suggested whether they should visit the round tower, believing that being there would greatly improve her mood. In fact, Karina had the same intention. Edwin lay collapsed in the dimly lit round tower. At that moment, there came the sound of violent knocking on the door. Yet the person outside was unable to get in no matter what. Edwin slowly opened his eyes. A figure from earlier in the day suddenly surfaced in his mind. Thanks to Alice's care and support, he had narrowly escaped disaster tonight. Inside the Duke's mansion, the servants stood in 2 orderly rows. Karina faced rejection at the round tower. She vented her anger on the servants, who exactly replaced the lock on the round tower. At this moment, Alice slowly descended from upstairs. It was me who changed it. When the mother realized it was her daughter who did it, this made Karina restrain herself a bit. But before she could ask for an explanation, Alice interrupted her first. From this day forward, you are absolutely forbidden to bully her again. His imposing demeanor momentarily left Karina in a daze, but once he regained his composure, he became even more curious about why Alice acted that way. Because I realized, there was a fascinating toy over there. The words spoken by the 7-year-old girl were enough to send chills down the spines of everyone present. Karina also found it somewhat intriguing. However, his anger tonight still hadn't been fully vented. Alright, just hand me the key. I happen to know some of your secrets. Would it really matter if others found out? Alice's mesmerizing gaze made Karina hesitate. After dismissing the servants, Karina casually asked, what kind of child's play is it this time? It wasn't until the words Edwin the gentleman were mentioned that he finally paused what he was doing. Don't you already know it yourself? Edwin is actually the Duke's son. As for who is responsible for his current state, I believe you should be even more aware of that. Karina's hand gradually clenched. Her expression started to grow serious. Do you think anyone would believe the nonsense you're saying? Or would they rather trust me? Then Karina turned around. As expected of my daughter, truly, such a malicious heart. Yet in his arrogant demeanor and tone, there was no further mention of wanting to go to the original tower, as if some kind of compromise was made out of fear. Alice collapsed to the ground the moment she stepped outside. Compared to the oppression from her mother, he felt even more heartache for Edwin. His jet-black hair was Karina's doing, when she worked as the Duke's maid. During the time when the lady was pregnant, Karina used a type of tea called lube. This was the reason Edwin was born with jet-black hair. To put it simply, he was the main culprit behind the entire tragedy. Why she ended up transmigrating as this guy's daughter left Alice completely baffled. When the morning sunlight woke him again, he remembered something even worse. It turned out that when he was 6 years old, he had already met Edwin. It was the the belief that Karina came to the original tower every day that ultimately caused the distance between him and his mother. So he placed all the blame on Edwin, which explains why their first meeting left a bitter impression. At that moment, Evan came over to check on the situation, but Alice turned away to avoid his gaze, leaving Evan a bit puzzled. "Stop bothering me. It's not like you'll ever join me in anything I do anyway. If you don't feel like being alone, I can take a walk with you." Of course, it would just be a simple walk together. "Evan, you're so kind." Alice suddenly turned and threw herself into his arms. His involvement gave Alice a new idea. He carefully packed the food meant for Edwin, and then, together with Evan, made their way to the round tower. However, it was his stamina that left Alice feeling a bit unsure. The two of them reached the top of the tower, showing completely opposite expressions. At that very moment, Alice pushed the door open. Inside the dim and foul-smelling room, the glaring red eyes stood out intensely. Alice began explaining to Edwin that the man was a doctor she had brought along, but unexpectedly, Edwin suddenly felt unwell. The reason turned out to be because he locked eyes with Edwin for a brief moment. Out of sheer fear, he collapsed to the ground and lost consciousness instantly. Even Alice's flurry of slaps had no effect. This chain sure dropped at the perfect moment. It seems matters of intelligence will have to wait for another time. It was at this moment that Alice suddenly realized she had accidentally gotten too close. Their eyes met and locked. Alice was filled with excitement. He actually didn't attack her. Taking a small step forward now was a giant leap toward survival in the future. Of course, everything should be done step by step. Edwin watched Alice's departing figure. He remained silent, but at last, he shifted his attention to the food. Back in her room, Alice collapsed onto the bed from exhaustion. This was all because she had carried Evan downstairs yesterday. Yet her physical fatigue did nothing to dampen her mood. She had, after all, successfully made her way into Edwin's circle. Alice once again extended an invitation to Evan to head to the original tower together. It's just that Alvin felt a bit awkward, not because he was scared. It was because he had other things to take care of. Right now, there's only my younger brother at home, so I'm the only one who can look after him. Alice certainly wouldn't try to stop it, because it concerned another white-haired male protagonist, holding Alvin's medicine. Alice once again pushed open the door of the old tower. It seemed like everything was still normal. Suddenly, Alice froze in place because he realized that all the food on the plate had been eaten. The hard work of these past several days finally paid off. Alice then handed over some fresh food. Edwin glanced at it briefly. He slapped his hand down on it, then stuffed it into his mouth, devouring it hungrily. Fortunately, the soup had cooled down a bit on the way, so it didn't end up burning him. This child, who had been confined here since a young age, didn't understand dining etiquette, which was completely natural. While eating, Edwin would occasionally glance at Alice. Alice asked, "Do you still dislike me now?" Edwin stammered as he began to speak. "I hate being the only one." These words made Alice's eyes glisten. After he wiped away his tears, he moved a bit closer to Edwin. It seems his injuries are indeed quite severe, although he really wanted to break free from his shackles. But the chains forged by magic. Even Karina couldn't open it without permission. When Alice touched Edwin's body, Edwin did not resist. This indicated that he allowed her to touch him. He dampened the towel and gently wiped it across his face. Edwin remained still like this, letting him clean his body without objection. Alice realized that no matter how much she wiped, it seemed impossible to get it clean. In the next moment, she grabbed Edwin's arm. He began to rub his face vigorously. He refused to believe that this couldn't be wiped off. Finally, after Alice fiddled with him for a while, Edwin revealed his originally clean appearance. Alice placed her hand on his head with a chuckle. "So handsome, our Edwin is really obedient." This series of actions sent a shiver down Edwin's spine. He quickly turned his head to face the wall. Alice found it a bit strange. Could it be that he doesn't like being patted on the head? However, Alice was deeply conflicted. She still hadn't applied the medicine to his wound yet. "Edwin, could you turn around and look at me?" Seeing that he remained unresponsive, Alice had no choice but to place the medicine on the tray. She reminded him to make sure to apply it to his injury. That way, he wouldn't feel the pain anymore. Watching Alice's figure as she walked away, for the first time Edwin experienced a different kind of emotion. The dim tower was illuminated by a ray of light. Edwin was beginning to feel a bit of anticipation for his arrival. Alice was, as always, perfectly on time today. However, there was now a noticeable change in Edwin's expression. Alice seemed particularly delighted this time. Not only did he bring delicious food this time, he also brought along a warm and cozy blanket. But the most exciting part was the presence of an adorably charming main character. Alice took out a book in her hands. "Do you know the story of Cinderella?" Spending all his time in the round tower, Edwin naturally had no idea. What Alice needed to do was to describe to her the world beyond the round tower, using fairy tales to help her rediscover a childlike heart. The stepmother said, "Cinderella, you and the prince are actually siblings." Is this the Cinderella story she had read before? Alice quickly closed the book. What kind of bizarre fairy tales are these? At this moment, she noticed a corner of the book had peeled off, and after she tore it off, the book, titled Crimson Crystal Slippers, was discovered. It was found in the owner's study. How could a 7-year-old possibly read something like this? At just 7 years old, how would he understand this kind of material? Alice immediately sensed that something was wrong. As expected, the poisoned apple from Snow White, the stalks of demons, beasts, and mermaids. The plan to help Edwin rediscover his childlike innocence has completely failed. Suddenly, Alice had a moment of inspiration. If not, then no. Why not just make one up yourself? A very long time ago, 2 children climbed a mountain late at night. Why did they climb the mountain? Because they were going to pick strawberries. They were very close friends. However, a fierce tiger appeared in front of them. The hungry tiger wanted to eat one of them. The 2 children eagerly volunteered to be the tiger's meal, because they couldn't bear the thought of dying right in front of themselves. Later, the tiger felt somewhat moved, so it ended up eating both of them. In the end, it decided not to eat anyone. The children went on to live happy lives. How about it, Edwin? Was the story interesting? But then the child sent a soul-piercing question. What exactly is a tiger? Alice explained that it's a creature with a violent temperament. A fierce-looking animal. Can that tiger use a whip? Did he associate the tiger with Karina? Then what does a friend mean? Alice was relieved they finally got to the main topic. A friend is someone who shares good things with each other. Like the relationship between you and me. Edwin felt a bit dejected. Does it count if I've never done anything for you? Of course, it counts. We've been close friends for a long time. But always remember one thing. When it comes to friends, the most important thing is to never hurt each other. Make sure you keep this in mind. Do you understand that we must protect one another? Under no circumstances should you harm each other. Alright, I'll kill all the tigers. Alice felt a bit awkward. There's no need to kill them all. Alright, just don't kill me and we're good. Alice, rest assured, I will always stand by you. In just the past few days, because Alice visits the round tower every day, it's rare to have time to sit and enjoy tea with her mother. Karina's recent calmness made Alice feel a bit uneasy. Alice felt somewhat unsettled by Karina's newfound tranquility, but she quickly brought up what happened that night. Only bad kids threaten their mom. If anyone overheard those outrageous remarks from that night, both my mother and I would end up homeless on the street. Alice put on a puzzled expression. The 2 of them looked like they were carved from the same mold. Anyone with sharp eyes would probably recognize it. These words gave Karina a sense of relief. Honestly, I thought the same way at first. But it's not like there aren't people who look alike. Mom dislikes children who are foolish. Alice's face fell with disappointment upon hearing that. Apologize to Karina. If that's the case, then hand over the key to the round tower. At that moment, Alice lifted her head with a smile. It seems you've forgotten what I mentioned earlier. After dealing with Karina, Alice was completely exhausted. When he returned to his room, he found the place in complete disarray. It seems Karina had already sent someone to look for him. It was just the key to the round tower. He hid it on Elvin. What surprised Alice a little was, this time, Elvin volunteered to head to the round tower. And Alice didn't just bring food for Edwin. What is this? An apple? How about this one? Juice. Oh my dear Edwin is really so clever. He recognized it so quickly. Looking at Edwin, who seemed completely harmless, even Ivan began to cautiously approach him. Don't touch me, or I'll kill you. At this, Ivan quickly stepped back about 8 feet. Alice spoke to Edwin. Ivan is a good person, you know. You must not harm him. When Edwin heard this, he finally nodded obediently. Right now, I'm afraid only Alice's words might get through to him. This heartwarming and healing scene left Ivan feeling somewhat touched. So on the first day, he made a decision. I think the young lady needs to make more friends her age. Only then can she understand what healthy friendships are like. Ivan cleared his throat lightly. Miller, come out and say hello to the young lady. At that moment, a white-haired head peeked out from behind the tree. Alice was completely frozen in place. The white-haired figure before her, wasn't he another protagonist from the novel? Miss Hale Elgar. This is my younger brother, Miss Hale. And this is Miss Alice. From now on, you two will be friends. There was no need for Ivan to introduce him. Alice knew this white-haired figure even better than he did. The result was the white-haired person shouting stop. His comment about how ugly he was left Ivan utterly shocked. However, how could the kind-hearted Alice possibly blame him? His personality turned out to be exactly as described in the book. Perhaps we should introduce ourselves. Don't go anywhere. At this moment, his brother's serious voice echoed. Meyer, your words are so crude. That's incredibly rude. Hurry and apologize to Miss Alice. The way Meyer was addressed reminded Alice of something. That name was a term of endearment Ewan used for Miss Hale, and later, Edwin seemed to call him that as well. My dear Meyer, from this moment on, no one will ever look at you with filthy eyes again. You belong to me entirely, from head to toe. Not even a single strand of hair is an exception. Whenever she thought of this, a faint smile would appear on Alice's face. Only the white-haired one behind started sobbing. Isn't it because he always causes his brother to come home late? I hate being home alone. Alice interrupted Evan. Hello, my name is Alice. I've been frail and sickly since I was a child. That's why I end up troubling your brother. I truly apologize. I shouldn't have fallen ill. Hearing this, the white-haired one reacted, turned away and murmured softly, It's all right, Michaela. Do you dislike me? Dislike? Alice shrugged. Well, that's such a shame. I really like you. But even so, the white-haired one still didn't appreciate it. Erwin hurried to apologize, but he had one more request. I was just hoping Alice could take care of him for a while. Neil, I'll be back right away. A sheep walking into a tiger's den. The white-haired one remained completely silent. Feeling downcast, he showed his emotions through his silence. Noticing Alice was constantly sneaking glances. Seeing the white-haired one made his temper flare. Why do you keep staring at me? All right, then I won't look anymore. Such behavior made the white-haired one tremble with anger. Soon, the white-haired one fell sound asleep. Sunlight streamed across his face, prompting Alice to move closer for a better look. By the time the white-haired boy woke up, a flower crown had fallen onto his head. Misha, this is the flower crown I made. With drowsy eyes, he rubbed them gently. In this state, he looked so endearing to Alice that her maternal instincts kicked in. Alice also crafted one for Evan, one big and one small. Is this what happiness feels like? Of course, Alice wouldn't forget about him. A hint of floral scent drifted out from the dark cage. It was Edwin, staring at the garland in his hands. Completely unsure of how it was supposed to be used, Alice noticed this, and placed the garland on his head, only to have Edwin reverse it back onto her. Alice, it looks better on you. Well, since the child said so, then I'll just keep wearing it all day today. Of course, he had something even more important to do, which was to introduce the white-haired Misha to Edwin. It's just that no matter how Alice described or praised, Edwin didn't seem to show much reaction. He even appeared a little disheartened. Does Alice like beautiful things? Probably no one would dislike beautiful things. Edwin's tone carried a hint of nervousness. So, how do I look? Am I just as beautiful? Of course you are. Edwin simply turned his head away. He squeezed the shackles on his body. Alice naturally understood what he meant. Don't worry, when you grow up, you will look even more beautiful than you do now. Since you want to know what you look like, next time, I'll bring you a mirror to see for yourself. But this time, Alice broke her promise. Whenever the seasons change, this body tends to experience some old ailments. Spending too much time in the stuffy air of the round tower has made his symptoms worse this time compared to before. However, Alice is now more concerned about the two male leads. From Alan, she learned that Miss Hale had once again driven away the new servant. Alice, however, wasn't surprised at all. The story's character tags never lie. Alice suggested that he could come and keep her company. I despise ugly people. Faced with the disgruntled expression of the white-haired person, Alice showed no sign of blame. It was just his coughing that startled Misha, who was nearby. Are you going to die? No, something like this won't kill me. Then came the sound of sobbing at that moment. Alice couldn't figure out why the child was crying. Mom said the same thing. She also claimed she wouldn't die. But in the end, I was still deceived. Alice noticed this. She reached out and touched her. Don't worry about it. I'll only be unwell for a while. Evan will make me better. Besides, I still have you by my side. It was only a short moment. Alice immediately regretted saying those words. Then let me help you recover faster. With a soft plop, a damp towel was slapped onto the surface. Seeing the child's face filled with anticipation, Alice could only tremble as she said it was very effective. It felt so cool that the fever seemed to subside. Hee hee. It really works. Then, the white-haired person picked up the spoon and blew on the soup meant for Misha. I think it's a bit. Don't you want to eat it? Seeing the child's disappointed eyes, how could Alice possibly refuse? How did you know? I was just feeling really hungry. This boy nearly walked off with Alice's spoon, but looking at his completely innocent expression, Alice could only let him continue feeding her. Misha was genuinely, I truly like you a lot. The next moment, the white-haired one looked terrified. You're not about to die, are you? A passing servant overheard the sound of intense sobbing. When he pushed the door open to take a look, Alice appeared to have passed away peacefully. It was just that their matters had been relayed to Karina's ears. He recalled that Ivan had never been particularly close to Alice before. If Alice's previous threats weren't mere empty words, then it's highly likely that the information came from Ivan. sunlight spilled across the round tower just like any other day. It was Edwin's gaze that had lost its spark. Delicious food became hard to swallow, because the person who came to see him turned out to be Elvin. Please check my wound for me. I don't like it. Even if I don't like it, there's no choice. I'm going to help you with the treatment. It was just Elvin treating Edwin's wounds. He realized that the medication had no effect on his wound. Clearly, Karina hadn't come here to cause trouble, yet the wound kept worsening instead of healing. It might be due to some kind of malicious curse. At that moment, a question about when Alice would arrive interrupted Ivan's train of thought. He had almost fully recovered, but after this, he might not be able to visit as frequently. The air here is extremely harmful to the young lady's respiratory system. It could even be life-threatening. It was the same gloomy and dark cage. Alice collapsed into a pool of blood. What surprised him was the one who killed him was still Edwin. Alice, startled awake from her dream, noticed that the scene just now was different from how it was described in the original story. However, Alice dismissed it as nothing more than a ridiculous dream. Alice, lie down quickly. What if you get sick again? I've already recovered. You're even weaker than an ant. The air becomes slightly impure, and you start coughing nonstop. Unable to resist the persuasion of the white-haired individual, Alice had no choice but to lie back down on the bed. The white-haired person was somewhat curious about what kind of dream she had. Just a friend, that's all. Of course, Alice wouldn't tell him that the friend was actually his future partner. The white-haired person felt a bit down because he had no friends. At that moment, Alice's gentle voice came through. Neil is also my friend. To ensure Alice wouldn't feel bored, the white cat started reading a fairy tale book to Alice. The gullible prince thought I couldn't speak. I plan to steal the kingdom's secrets while he sleeps. Alice felt a bit curious. Where did this fairy tale book come from? I took it from your study. Misha forbids reading those books with improper values. It's fine. I've already finished reading it a long time ago. At that moment, the servant brought it over. The cake appeared to be a lavish treat. It made the child drool with hunger. Alice saw how much he liked it, so she handed her piece of cake to him. Thank you, Alice. This is absolutely delicious. Even Alice didn't expect that a single cake could win this child over. But just at that moment, a mouthful of blood interrupted Alice's thoughts. Miss Hale in front of her had already collapsed to the ground unsteadily. Alice shouted his name loudly. She tried to wake him up, but Miss Hale remained completely unconscious. Someone get a doctor right away. Evan, who was still in the room, heard Alice's voice. After carefully examining him, Evan slowly lifted his head. He's been poisoned. There was a faint minty aroma coming from his mouth. It comes from a poisonous herb called Silurian. Alice only cares about one thing right now, whether Miss Hale will regain consciousness. Luckily, Mir has some resistance to toxins. There shouldn't be any serious harm. Hearing this, Alice let out a sigh of relief, but a sense of guilt surged in her heart. It was all because of that cake. It was originally meant to be hers. Evan was visibly shocked when he heard this. In other words, someone poisoned Alice. Evan gently reassured Alice. There's no need for you to blame yourself too much. What if Miss Alice was the one poisoned? She might never wake up again. It's a relief that it wasn't the young lady who got poisoned. Just as he was about to report to the madam, Alice hurriedly stopped him. His stammering tone left Evan utterly shocked. Could it be that the person who poisoned her was Lady Karina? Evan suggested that Alice should leave the estate. It's fine. I need to stay here for a while. She waited for her personal maid to arrive. The scene was in complete chaos. Before the maid could ask anything, Alice spoke up first. That guy named Michel really doesn't know his place. From now on, he is not allowed to step into my house ever again. Do you hear me? Even though Alice used this method to protect Michel, but the idea of Karina poisoning someone was something he had never considered. It was a scenario that had never crossed his mind before. It seems the plan will have to be executed ahead of schedule. At that moment, Karina walked up from behind him. She looked as though she was admiring her own masterpiece, but seeing Alice unharmed still left him somewhat irritated. Even so, it was enough to make him feel a bit uneasy. Meanwhile, Alice had already launched her counterattack. Accompanied by her personal maid, she arrived in the bustling district. Walking through the alley, they arrived at a shop, and he was like Karina, a witch selling backless dresses. Little one, what would you like to buy? Alice showed an innocent and pure expression. Do you sell tea here? My mom loves it. Looking at the tea handed over by the witch, Alice asked with curiosity, do you have a kind of tea that gives off a rose fragrance? The witch's eyes narrowed slightly. What is your mother's name? Alice leaned close and whispered softly into his ear. The witch, who heard these words, pulled out a bag from her pocket. This should be the thing your mother needs. Alice placed the deer's shell into the water. Sure enough, The moment it touched the water, it changed. But just at that moment, her hand was suddenly grabbed. Alice quickly pulled her hand away. There was merely a butterfly mark on the wrist. "What did you do to me?" "Just a small gift, that's all." When Alice wanted him to remove it, the witch from earlier vanished along with the little shop. 2 days later, the Duke received a letter. The moment it was torn open, a few deer shells fell out. What concerned the Duke even more was the content written on the letter. "Madden, go investigate this tea. Then prepare a carriage for me. I need to return to the Duke's mansion." The sender of this letter happens to be Alice. The story now seems to have been fast-forwarded by him. If the Duke learns the truth, I'm afraid I might end up being punished as well. After all, she is Karina's daughter. At that moment, I heard Evan's voice. "Evan, it's been a while." Upon learning that Miss Hale had recovered, Alice's smile grew even brighter. "It's good to see the recovery." Additionally, Alice reminded Ivan to take good care of Edwin, though it is easier said than done. During the time Alice was away, Ivan tried offering delicious food, wiping his body, or reading fairy tales. All ended in failure. This is the first time encountering a child more difficult to manage than Miss Hale. This is Ivan heading towards the round tower, unaware there was someone following behind. By the time he looked back again, it was already too late. Alice, who was sound asleep in the room, was jolted awake by a sudden splash of water. "Did you sleep well? Kindly cooperate and come with us." When Elvin woke up, he found that Alice's personal maid was also tied up here. As he turned his head, he saw Karina gasping for breath, and Edwin covered in bruises. His wounds had increased. Then Karina burst into maniacal laughter. "So it was you stirring up trouble all along, Elvin Elgar." Then Karina ordered someone to bring Alice inside. When Alice arrives, Edwin's calm gaze finally showed a flicker of emotion. "The pretend game has been taken a bit too far. Did you see it? This is the punishment I prepared for you. Who told you to go overboard? This has nothing to do with Aina and Alvin." "How could it have nothing to do with them? If Aina hadn't made a mistake and failed to put the poison in your food, why would I trouble other maids to handle this task?" With that, she stepped on Ivan once more. "And you definitely shouldn't interfere in other people's affairs. You encouraged my daughter just to dig up evidence, didn't you? You don't actually believe that revealing the secret to the Duke would earn you a small position or title, do you? This bastard has already been utterly abandoned. He's nothing but worthless trash that no one cares about." She then took the poison from the servant. "There's no way Alice and the others are leaving this place today. This is the punishment I am giving you. Keep your eyes wide open and watch closely." At that moment, Alice lunged forward, trying to stop Karina. "I have already sent the evidence to the Duke. It won't be long before you face punishment. Did you go to meet Stella? It took me so much effort to get where I am today. How dare you stand in my way?" The overwhelming difference in strength left Alice unable to break free. "Then you can go down with me and perish together." But at that very moment, the chains behind her suddenly snapped apart. A pair of hands emerging from the abyss reached out, accompanied by a sharp cracking sound. Karina's movements gradually came to a halt. He never imagined that harming Alice would lead to such consequences for him. Amid the terrified gazes of everyone around, Edwin calmly approached Alice. There wasn't a hint of joy from revenge. Then he leaned in close to Alice. "I'm sorry for causing you harm. I couldn't break the chains sooner. I truly wanted to protect you well. Forgive me." Once again, Edwin lost consciousness. He collapsed to the ground. His body was exactly as described in the book. When the power awakens, it feels like boiling lava. It was at that moment Alvin stepped forward. Golden light radiated from his hands. Before Alice could ask anything, Alvin explained to her that it was divine power. Earlier, seeing Edwin's injuries not improving, he decided to try using divine power to heal him. This gradually lifted the curse on Edwin. His injuries also began to improve, but just at this moment, a terrifying voice echoed. "Can someone tell me what exactly is going on here?" Alice, being Karina's daughter, as expected, was imprisoned. Even if it had nothing to do with her, the Duke would most likely still vent his anger on her. Alice, who was brought to the Duke's room, stared at the Duke standing before her. The look in their eyes seemed to convey a message to themselves, but saying the wrong thing could lead to being killed. "Alice, what's in this bag? Is this tea leaves?" The Duke instructed the butler to use this to brew a cup of tea for Alice. Alice smiled happily on the surface, but inside, she was secretly cursing this person countless times. Accidentally consuming something mixed with dirt would be no different from taking poison. When faced with the Duke's interrogation, Alice tried her best to distance herself from the situation. "I heard you've been going to the Round Tower a lot lately to pick on Edwin." Alice quickly denied it. She said she just wanted to be friends with him. "Oh, so that's how it is. The tea has been brewed. Take a sip first." Facing this tea with an exposed back, he could only muster the courage to drink it. Seeing Alice lift the teacup, the Duke's gaze grew noticeably heavier. Just as Alice was about to take a sip, the Duke stopped her in time. time. Not a single word you say today can be untrue. You may leave now, until everything is clarified. You'd better stay put. Back in her room, Alice felt like she was running a fever. She wanted to go out and buy some cold medicine, but she realized she was being held captive. In contrast to the fragile Alice, Edwin's body recovered quite quickly. However, what puzzled Elvin a little was, the Duke showed no joy upon seeing his son. Instead, he questioned Elvin about how he treated his injuries. Ordinary treatments could never heal his wounds. Elvin was taken aback. It seems the Duke knows the reason behind Edwin's injury. Elvin had no choice but to lie, claiming he had created a highly effective medicine. He wasn't ready to reveal his divine powers yet. Evan suggested that he wanted to meet Alice. However, he had no idea. At that moment, Alice had already boarded the carriage and left the estate. By the time the Duke and his companion arrived at Alice's room, Alice was nowhere to be found. But Alice didn't leave without a purpose: to provide assistance to Lee. Michelle wanted to escape from the person who had been tormenting her. That person was truly terrifying. Even Miss Hale's soul was bound and controlled. He endured endless humiliation and carried heavy burdens, until one day, he finally escaped from his grasp, and arrived at a secluded island called Haidong, known by few. With the care and kindness of the villagers there, Miss Hale's shattered heart gradually began to heal. However, when that man eventually came, everything here turned into nothing but illusions. The helpless villagers, including Miss Hale, all met their end. Now, it's just you and me left here. I've always said that the spot by your side belongs only to me. It's just that, as of now, the one heading to Hayden has been replaced by Alice. At that very moment, a passing knight noticed him. "Hey kid, what's your name?" As he spoke, he took off his hat once again. Blonde hair and blue eyes. It seems to be him. Don't go accusing the wrong person, you guys. Isn't this man also blonde with blue eyes? Before the knight could say anything, Alice turned around and ran off immediately. But just then, his hand was grabbed by someone. That person was Alice. Sure enough, a long-haired boy stopped him in his tracks. Of course, Alice knew exactly who he was. Lois Altman. In the original story, he became good friends with Miss Hale, and even volunteered to become his protector. It was merely during the attempt to stop Edwin later on that he met his end at the hands of the other party. What a pitiable supporting character he was. Meanwhile, at the Duke's residence, Edwin had already regained consciousness and immediately looked around in search of his figure. The warm room was empty, leaving him alone inside. He stumbled out the door to continue his search. The surrounding servants, upon seeing him, were paralyzed with fear, not daring to make a single sound. When Edwin arrived at the Duke's room, he heard a voice from inside saying, "Alice, Garnett truly has some audacity. A 7-year-old child, daring to run away from home in such weather." These words made Edwin lose control instantly. Outside the room came a series of agonized screams. Then Edwin slowly pushed the door open. Hitting people is not a good habit. Where did Alice go? He chose to leave on his own. Why should I go to the trouble of bringing him back? Their eyes met in silence, yet the tense atmosphere was broken in the next moment. It was Edwin who took the lead in breaking it. Without a word, he turned around and walked away, because he sensed a familiar presence. Edwin's icy gaze shifted to one of slight panic. "Edwin, what's wrong with you? Edwin, what happened to you?" Edwin extended a hand that felt strangely familiar, but this time it was for a tight embrace. After a long moment, Alice pushed him away. The wounds had nearly healed completely. "Is there still anywhere that feels uncomfortable?" "There isn't." Alice was a bit surprised, because this was the first time she had seen him in a well-lit place. At that moment, the Duke approached. Alice felt slightly awkward. "I think I'll come back later." "Halt. Who gave you permission to leave the city? And what right do you have to imprison me? I am the child my mother brought to the Duke's household, but now, she has already lost her title as Duchess. So, I am no longer a child of this family either." Just as the Duke was about to speak, Edwin said something utterly shocking. "I want to leave with Alice too." "Absolutely not." "Why does she look so aggrieved?" "Alice couldn't possibly say it's because of your pairing, could she?" "Alice, don't you want to be with me?" "How could that be?" "It's simply because you're still young." The moment those words were spoken, the entire room fell into complete silence. It was only then that Alice realized she seemed to be a year younger than Edwin. After a brief pause, the Duke spoke. "I won't lock you up anymore. Just stay here for now." Alice looked a bit puzzled. "If my only son were to be taken away by you, that would be quite troublesome. So, are you willing to stay?" Of course, Alice had no reason to refuse, but her face turned even redder. She stumbled and fell into Edwin's arms. The high fever had already made her unsteady on her feet. Fortunately, a few days later, Alice was back to her usual self. It turns out that nothing beats a home-cooked meal. Aina remained her personal maid. Aina, have you eaten yet? Of course I have. Now I can hold my head high and live with confidence. Ever since everyone found out you saved the young master, who would dare deny me a meal now? Aina even whispered something to Alice regarding what happened that day. She didn't say a single word to the Duke. Not a single sentence was exchanged with the Duke. There's still one issue to deal with now. As she spoke, Aina turned her head away. How long does the young master plan to stay here? Seeing Edwin's glaring red eyes, it gave Anna such a fright that she shuddered all over. Edwin, would you like to take a walk outside? I don't want to follow after. He was seen crawling slowly on the ground toward Alice. If you don't want to see me, I'll just stay under the bed then. It seems this child Alice won't be leaving today, but when you think about it, in an unfamiliar environment, being a bit clingy is quite normal. Aina, I still want to eat meat. Do you have any steak? Even though Evan had instructed not to eat meat, yet Aina still couldn't win against Alice's persistence. Absolutely not allowed. Whether it's stew or steak, all of it has to be avoided. Then, Ivan started examining Alice's condition. You're still running a low fever right now. You shouldn't leave the house for the time being. Ivan, are you upset about something? At that moment, his pen paused mid-writing. Alice continued with her strategy. Are you planning to stop talking to me completely? The pen in Ivan's hand snapped in two. Do you even have any sense at all? You're only 7 years old. How could you leave home without saying a word? What if you were kidnapped or someone found you a bit too late? What would happen then? If you truly have nowhere else to go, you can absolutely come to my place. Am I really that cold and heartless in your eyes?